This episode is brought to you by Ghost Patch. Ghost Patch is a law enforcement owned and operated company specializing in patches, coins, and flex shields. Quality is top priority with low prices. They always offer free design work and never charge mold or setup fees. Stop letting the big companies rip you off and check out Ghost Patch at ghostpatch.com and ghostpatchcustom.com. Now to the next story.
It's actually an entire culture shift in law enforcement. I used to teach a lot, and I used to talk about there's been some shifts in law enforcement through the years. We've gone through one, and you're on the ground floor part of another huge historic actual change in the entire culture of American law enforcement, and you guys have been the tip of the spear in that. Dude, that's huge. And if me calling my chief and risk my dear friend hating my guts, then if it saved his life, good. You guys did it with Gordon, and kudos that the entire American law enforcement culture has shifted, and we've gotten to be some small spoke in that wheel.
I went through a dark time, probably 2 months after that. I questioned whether I wanted to continue my law enforcement career, but it also confirmed that this is why I do what I do. This is the reason why we put a badge and gun on every day and go out here and fight the good fight. And man, it's just an honor to continue his legacy and some of the things that I continued on as a law enforcement officer. But I think that's what shaped my passion for law enforcement, was the death of him.
He hears automatic gunfire and immediately transitions from servant leader, servant heart, talking so sweet to this child, to get away from here, get in your car, grabs his rifle, and goes and freaking kills somebody. And I got chill bumps literally telling that story. If anybody in this country needs an example of what we do every day, whether you're a citizen or whether you're a 21-year-old trying to figure out what this career is, then you got my man at Allen PD, that you can be a caregiver and an angel and a warrior in 3 seconds and go kill a bad guy.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
A real friend is one who believes in you, even when you've stopped believing in yourself. Today we're sitting with two guests that I am grateful to call friends. Their genuine dedication to the service of others is what makes me gravitate to them. I've heard about both men, but actually got to meet them in 2021 when they reached out about an idea to start their own show for the great organization that is known in Texas law enforcement lore as TMPA. TMPA is the largest law enforcement association in the great state of Texas. It was founded in 1950 and it has protected the interest of law enforcement since. Today we are bringing you a familiar voice and a couple of new voices to the show. But all of these guests have a common goal. The shared goal of making this profession better, making officers better, and protecting officers' rights. This show will tell you the story of the voice of Texas law enforcement. This is a behind-the-scenes look at the duo behind the Blue Grit podcast. Welcome, boys. Before we get deep into y'all, I do want to welcome on a special guest co-host, Sergeant. Tell the listener who you are and where you're from.
My name's James Babb. I'm a sergeant with the Plano Police Department and a past president of TMPA.
Yeah, we ambushed the guys this morning with James here. Had to have it happen. I like to get people involved that we're all connected in some way,
Yep.
and y'all know James very well, so I wanted to put y'all at ease
Intimately.
very intimately. Yeah,
Yes.
that was an old school ringtone.
Yeah.
But
I thought our time was up. I
yeah,
thought, man,
yeah,
that was quick.
so yeah. There's actually I'm gonna leave that in there. It's kind of funny.
Sorry about that.
The microwave's ready with our TV dinner. We're gonna get into Clint first. You've been on. You've come on for your own episode, and you actually set in. You've come on for a message from the host, but a lot's happened since you came on, and now you're the Texas FOP president. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I've been around FOP for about 30 years, was involved with FOP at Garland PD, got out, went to work for TMPA, got appointed to the board a little over a year ago, I guess, as secretary, and served in that role, and had some feedback about running for president, ran for president, was elected this past summer, and glad to serve and see what we can do with Texas FOP and make it relevant and grow it a little bit.
So that election, how did that go?
I had a lot of support, but I don't know that I won anything. I think it's that nobody else wanted it because I was unopposed.
Wow.
So
Okay.
There goes all the stolen election talk.
yeah, there's been a lot of congratulations. I think they mean condolences, but it was good. I'm glad to be a part of it. Texas FOP has had up and downs through the years. The numbers have fluctuated from 14,000 to 3,000, and FOP nationally has about 380,000 members. Texas should be the largest FOP state in the country, in my opinion, and we're not. We're like 7th. We're about to take over 6th. My goal is for us to move up to 3rd or so. Pennsylvania is number 1, and that just doesn't sit right with me at all.
No, I hate the Eagles.
Yeah, so
What's the difference between, can you tell the listener, I know the difference, but can you tell the listener the difference between FOP and TMPA, please?
yeah, so DPA is a local association. You guys take care of Dallas specific. TMPA is a Texas specific organization. We've got 34,000, a little over 34,000 members that are all Texas cops. FOP is that national umbrella where you guys are the umbrella over DPD. We're kind of the umbrella for state that aren't independent, like you guys in Houston, Harris County. And then FOP gives us that national affiliation. 2 weeks ago, I was in D.C. walking the halls, and when you walk in somewhere, they know who FOP is. We recently got H.R. 82 passed, which is historic legislation that people said would never, ever pass. But FOP wields the relationships and the political capital to do that. When it looked like H.R. 82 was a little sketchy, the national president boarded a plane and flew to Mar-a-Lago and met with President-elect Trump at the time, who blessed it, which suddenly meant everybody else fell in line, and it passed. And that's just one example of the political capital and the relationships that FOP has. And DPA is an FOP lodge, in addition to being the DPA.
So what are some of the biggest challenges for the state, what you're seeing right now?
Man, it's kind of twofold. Right now, the pendulum is swinging back to where people are wanting to support the police, but they're doing so with caution, and there's a lot of protections that need to be put into place. One of the deals nationwide and in Texas that we're trying to push for is the Protect and Serve Act. Last year, the numbers are deceiving. There was less police officers shot last year, which sounds great, but more died, and more died as a result of ambushes, which means the job is actually becoming more dangerous. Although the number shot was lower, the number killed and the number intentionally ambushed, attacked, not ran over by a DWI, and I'm not minimizing those, but the intentional laying in wait ambush attacks has increased. So although the support for police feels like it's getting better, we're still getting attacked and ambushed and murdered. So there's still a lot of work to do.
Well, what I see a lot of organizations and businesses, they're being more outward with their support for police than before. A lot of times they would give donations like to the ATO or police organizations from the shadows.
Yeah.
They didn't want to get
sad,
shamed.
isn't
It is very sad. But I can say from the ATO side, I know that QT is very open and they want to be on the tip of the spear when it comes to supporting law enforcement. And we have a really good partnership deal with QT. Shout out Quick Trip, great organization, and they want to be very outspoken and loud when it comes to
That's
supporting
awesome.
us. Yes,
Shout it from the rooftops, baby.
There's some things that we're working on here with Dallas PD and ATO and QT that I think the listeners might be a little bit surprised to hear, but I'm proud of that partnership.
Love hearing that.
And it's a great cup of coffee.
Clean restrooms too.
Yeah, they are.
So you kind of led me into the shift in support for police officers. It never can be, perfect, right?
True.
You think just the election was one of the biggest kind of catalysts in that change?
I think it's a combination. I think the perfect storm is what caused the anti-law enforcement movement, and I think the perfect storm is what is helping bring that back again. I think the social experiments in Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, all those failed experiments, people are tired of crime. They want things fixed. I think a change in the administration, I think, has helped. But I think for a long time, the police got out-messaged by other organizations. And I think Bridging the Divide, I think there's podcasts, I think police are getting back in the message game, or actually getting in. We've never been in it before, but we're getting back in and getting our message out too. And I think that's equally as important, because if only one side of a story is ever told, that's why you take their side in the divorce, because only one side got out, and you need to hear both sides before you start choosing what you're going to believe in it. And I think the police are doing a better job messaging. I think mainstream media dying is helpful. I think there's a perfect storm, really.
I think a lot of that, when you talk about messaging, long-form communication like what we do with our shows, is everything taken in context. I mean, as opposed to a news story that you may see 5-second clip of something, which the full 5-minute clip is much different, and also sound bites too. I think people are kind of tired of that because they kind of see what it actually is.
Joe Rogan's killing mainstream media.
Yes.
And Trump and J.D. Vance going on there and for 3 hours showing that they're just people. They're just humans.
Right.
Is a lot more palatable than a 2-second slanted clip that's edited and you don't really know what you may have seen in that 2-second clip.
There's a mutual friend that of Clint and I that started off in the media business in Florida. And when he was going to for training, it was in that nationwide training that he was going to. There was a clip of an African American suspect that attacked law enforcement with a knife, and they each were given the opportunity to have the video and edit it for a news broadcast. And so, this individual that I'm talking about edited just to simply state the facts. It wasn't slanted, and the teacher, the instructor, did not like how the video was edited, because it wouldn't sell. And I think that was told to him in the class, and that right there told me kind of everything that I needed to know, moving forward, of how, we at TMPA, you guys with this podcast, of how we need to do a better job of broadcasting and highlighting pro-law enforcement stories and to combat the anti-law enforcement rhetoric.
Well, I think that and negativity is infectious anywhere.
Yes.
And whenever, we started the show, I did not want it to be Underground Cop 2.0.
Yeah.
Sorry, because there's so much negativity, even in this profession. And if you just go out and you want to bitch all the time about things, and then you become just the person that cries wolf all the time.
Yep.
And I think highlighting the positive part of this profession, and also that way the community members see the positive stories, as opposed to they hear enough of the bad ones.
Yep.
Those get highlighted very quickly. But there's so much history in this profession and in each city, and that's one of the missions, is to get that out there. Tyler, you're new to the mic, but longtime listener.
Yes.
And your handsome son is a big fan of the show.
He is. Both of my kids.
That's awesome. Can you tell the listener about you?
Man, Tyler Owen, I was born and raised right down the road in Irving, Texas. Proud Irving High graduate, 2003. I'm sure that school district would be forever changed because of my graduation. Met my beautiful wife there in high school. We became high school sweethearts, and that plays kind of a role into how we moved out to East Texas later on. I was working at FedEx Freight during high school, my last senior year, and I got to know, I can't recall the deputy's name, but he was a Dallas County deputy working side jobs, and he got so tired of having to look over his shoulder working side jobs, he wanted to go be a forklift operator at FedEx Freight. And it was that relationship that launched my law enforcement career. He actually talked me into going to work in that Lew Sterrett. And so
He left and talked you into going.
Yeah.
I'm leaving Dallas County. You go to Dallas County.
You go to Dallas County. It's not good for me, but I'm going to send you down there. But man, I grew up to a man a lot. With
How
FedEx.
old were you?
I was 18.
Okay.
I started at FedEx Freight the last part of my senior year. As soon as I graduated, he already had made a few phone calls. And so I put in for Dallas County, went to work at Lew Sterrett. A lot of friends of mine from high school were football players that didn't continue their education with football, but they went to work with me there at Dallas County. And, man, you talk about – we say it all the time. The best law enforcement – for those listeners out there that are kind of on the edge, they don't know really what they want to do. Maybe you have some high school listeners out there, and the best option for somebody to get their foot in the door for law enforcement is to work in the jail. There's a double-edged sword with that, though. I had a great time at Dallas County. I've still got friends that work at Dallas County. But I didn't make the best decision, really, whenever I knew. I worked at Dallas County at a time where Jim Bowles was when I started. Lupe Valdez came in and really transitioned and changed that department. But there wasn't really a future at that time as me as a DSO, what they called a detention service officer. And so I knew that I wanted to go continue my education and become a street cop. The reality is that towards the end of me going to the police academy, I made a bad decision. My dad, if you got to kind of think at the time in law enforcement, it really wasn't accepted to be homosexual. And my dad had just come out of the closet after high school, and it was known amongst my friends and family, but not outside of that. It was just a private deal that I didn't share with my coworkers. And so Lupe Valdez coming in, she was a very much proud lesbian, be the first lesbian female sheriff elected in Texas. And that information got out. And it was my brother-in-law incarcerated in Dallas County. And I made a poor decision to go confront him. Nothing physical happened, but that ultimately ended my career in the Dallas area. And so I had to go to the police academy, and I was stuck. I was at kind of a fork in the road where I could either go back and work at FedEx Freight or continue my law enforcement career. And so I chose to move out to East Texas where at that time the background process really wasn't as in-depth. And for the listener out there that's sitting in the patrol car right now that knows background investigators talk, and so it was difficult to get a job. And so that I went to work at Jefferson PD, and everything happens for a reason. And man, I'm fortunate that incident happened because it made me grow up as a man. And I learned a valuable lesson to it, that there's policies in place for a reason. And probably wasn't a good idea to go confront my brother-in-law. So,
where is Jefferson PD?
So Jefferson is deep East Texas. I say deep East. It's right there on the border of Louisiana and Texas, north of Marshall.
Is that out by like Hemphill and Lufkin in that area?
It's way north of Lufkin.
Okay.
So Jefferson sits about 45 minutes northwest of Shreveport, Louisiana. And so you might as well be wearing LSU colors whenever you go out in public. But that's essentially where Jefferson, beautiful country.
Yeah,
it's
Caddo
just
Lake.
Caddo Lake, the only natural lake in Texas.
Pine trees everywhere.
Pine trees everywhere, sloughs, swamps. And so, man, I moved out there with my wife and family and started relaunched my law enforcement career and went to work at Jefferson PD, a town of 2,000, 7-man agency. And I'll never forget this. I was talking to a deputy now. I believe he's a SWAT commander for Dallas County. His name's Keith Samet. I was on the phone with Keith Samet. And at the time, Jefferson had a siren for the volunteer fire department. So I'm on the phone with Keith, and we're talking and kind of trading stories. He's checking in on me, seeing how everything's going, and the volunteer fire department alarm went off. And so to give things in perspective, this is 2005. 1 alarm was a brush fire. 2 alarm was a vehicle accident. 3 alarm was a house fire. There wasn't any pagers this was the way that they communicated to the volunteer fire department to respond to these fires. And we had an older guy that literally would run from his house. It was just, so I'm on the phone with Keith when this alarm goes off, and Keith stops. And he said, "What year is it there? Like, what the hell is going on in the
Green
background?"
Acres.
Yeah, man. It was
Climbing a pole to
It
talk.
was wild. But I had a good time, and I eventually went to work for Marshall PD. And in doing so, I became the president of our local association. And me and Clint got introduced and put up a good fight against a toxic leadership, toxic police chief there. And that's really my launch with TMPA and how I kind of got launched into TMPA. And Clint brought me on as a part-timer. Actually, I think when James Babb was the president, or he might have been the past president at the time. But I went to work for them as a part-time field rep working at Marshall PD later on in my career.
You kind of got a name for yourself too, being not necessarily outspoken, but courageous and standing up for the rank and file.
Yeah, and I think anybody that's in local leadership, there's not a how-to book how to do that. I think that if you always stay true to yourself and have that integrity aspect of it, and just do what's right, then I think you're going to be fine. But yeah, we did have a significant pay increase there at Marshall. We had, again, with the toxic leadership, working with Clint, and being a field rep, looking back on it.
He is very toxic. No,
Working with Clint with
okay.
TMPA. But we went to war with this police chief and essentially did what was the better thing for the department, and got him run off. Looking back on it, I'm shocked of the stuff that I did do, as a local police association leadership, because essentially what TMPA does is we work with local associations to better assist them and navigate through challenging times like that. And I think you and I got involved really kind of late in the game from that aspect. I mean, you probably pick up on. Yeah,
I want to get into the history of the TMPA. It started in 1950. Can one of y'all talk about tell the listener the history of that?
Yeah, so 1949, a couple of officers, a Fort Worth officer, San Antonio officer, and maybe APD or
I thought Dallas was in there too.
Yeah, Dallas, Fort Worth, and a San Antonio officer sitting around. There was a couple of laws potentially coming down the pike that they didn't like. And they're like, "Well, how do we stop this? How do we fix this?" And they decided, well, I guess you run for office. Well, then it became, well, you run. No, I'm not running. You run.
Draw straws.
So that was in 49 and 50. They formed TMPA just to try and figure out how to affect some laws and some legislation. They opened up TMPA. They got somebody elected or friend in ledge, and kind of began initially not really as a legal plan, more as a fraternal organization, but how to steer law enforcement related bills on behalf of law enforcement across Texas. And it was years later that the legal plan came along.
And what's interesting is the first law I believe that TMPA was involved with getting passed was actually theft from a vehicle. What we know now is burglary of a motor vehicle. Kind of a little history lesson on TMPA. But our bread and butter now is legal, but it was formed for legislation purposes.
Which is funny because we were actually a little bit late to the game with legal.
Yeah.
How many executive board members do y'all have for that?
So we have an executive board, and then we have regional directors who are trustees to the board, so to speak, or they're board of the directors. There are 18 working cops. Everybody on the board is still full-time, active police officers around the state. So it's 18 overall, and then there's the executive board included in that 18.
How many departments do y'all serve?
Oh, man. We have 34,000 members. There's about 2,800 law enforcement agencies in Texas.
Damn.
I would say 20. We touch 2,000 at least, I would think. I mean, there's some departments out there that are on paper that don't have any officers. And that's one thing our executive director has said multiple times is that we need to look at it from a strategic standpoint of saying, kind of, can we condense some of these down? But I would say every bit of 1,800 to 2,000 departments that are umbrellaed within under TMPA.
The beautiful part to me is if you're not Dallas, Houston, Harris County, Austin, which are independents, they don't need someone else. You guys are big boys and you stand on your own. But one of the things that I've always really valued about TMPA is we don't try and take over Dallas or Houston or San Antonio or whoever. Y'all are sister organizations. I mean, we're basically locked armed. We meet every morning in the Capitol during the ledge, and there'll be somebody from Houston, Dallas, TMPA, the game wardens, and we're locked arms together, and it's a great team. So I like that it's not a competition. And so a lot of people will ask, well, why isn't Houston a part of TMPA? Well, they have 5,000 members. They don't need someone like that. But they're our sister organization. We're in lockstep, marching in unison with them, and I'm thankful for that, because the standalone, I'm the big dog, we don't need anybody, never really accomplishes anything.
What are some of the services? And you talked about the legal aspect. Can y'all kind of go into that?
I mean, yeah, so we have legal, and then the ledge portion, which is not really a service to our members, but we have 2 full-time lobbyists that work the Capitol during session. But on top of all the other stuff, member benefits, free wills, but more importantly, I think the biggest thing that I think that when you're a part of TMPA, you're a part of a family. And I think that's the biggest thing. Me as a field rep, Clint as a field supervisor, and even James as a past president with TMPA, when we identify a member or even a member of law enforcement, not necessarily even TMPA, if it's for the betterment of the mission, we're going to do everything in our power in order to assist that person. But there's so many benefits as far there. You have your legal protection, which is our bread and butter, like we said earlier, and then we have our lobbyist efforts, our legislation. But then we have free wills. I mean, it's very similar. But the biggest thing that I can say as a field rep and as an employee of this organization is that we're a huge family, and there's different mental wellness aspects of it that you can call in and get help with us. But there's really a lot. I mean, I can't even give you a list of how many different benefits there are being a part of us.
I'll tell you 2 things that stand out that are similar in nature. One ties into Tyler, and the other is the ATO. The tornadoes that tore through Garland and Rowlett several years ago.
2015, right?
Yeah. I got there 5 minutes after it happened. And literally Fred Frazier calls me and said, how many of y'all's members lost their home? I'm like, dude, I don't know. There's still debris floating out of the air. I mean, I don't know why. And he goes, well, I'm in Rowlett driving around handing out checks to cops so they can try and at least get some food and, some freaking dry underwear to put on until they figure out how to rebuild after their home's gone. And I'm like, dude, there's insulation still falling out of the sky, and the ATO is out here, and these ain't your members. He's like, we don't give a damn. These cops need help. That ties into Tyler. Tyler's a part-time field rep for me. He was jumping in all the time helping legal, and legal call comes in about a guy's house burned down, or I think his house burned to the ground, lost everything. Tyler calls me. He's like, hey, man, you care if I run with this deal? The guy's not a member. I was like, what do you got? And Tyler's like me. He's running 100 miles an hour through brick walls. I was like, what do you got? And he goes, well, dude literally lost everything he has. You mind if I try and help, even though he's not a member? I was like, knock yourself out. He calls me back 10 minutes later. He's like, hey, I was just going to let you know we're good. And I said, okay, what'd you do? Well, I called this company and got them to donate a Sam Brown. I called this company and got them to donate a uniform. I called this company and got them to donate him a pair of boots. I'm like, holy crap. And it's one of those small agencies where they don't provide anything. You almost have to buy your own friggin' police car. And Tyler jumped out. Dude's not a member, and outfits this guy with a full police gear so he can go back to work and at least try and make money. That's what this is really about.
Yeah. And I think that, for your Dallas police officers that are listening to this, your Plano police officers that are listening to this, even Garland, I think, once again, God works in mysterious ways. And I'm not saying that you guys aren't humble. And I'm damn sure not saying that anybody listening that works for a large agency is not humble. But me, working in Jefferson, Texas, having to supply my ammunition, my belt, my boots, I think it's taken for granted to an extent. I worked for a little bit larger agency. But my passion is the mission of law enforcement. The mission of law enforcement is taking care of our brothers and sisters. I don't give a damn. I don't check your membership in order to assist cops. And I think that's the difference that everybody equally shares with TMPA is that right there.
Yeah, that's one thing that ATO prides itself on is we don't care if you're an NLEO member, you're BPA, you're DPA, or we help other agencies outside of Dallas County. We're all in this together.
Yep.
Joe, can I jump in on that?
Absolutely.
So I was president of TMPA when Hurricane Harvey occurred. And, of course, we had many, many members lose everything down on the coast. And back then, they stepped up, ATO stepped up and provided us a check through a bunch of the donations that they were receiving so that we could, in turn, with the money that we raised, present checks to our members, at least to get them on their feet. And it was something big for me because I went to Galveston and I actually handed out those checks. And one of the guys that I handed the check to kind of started tearing up. And he goes, I didn't know where I was going to stay tonight. My hotel was up. I didn't have any money. And those are the things that ATO provided. And I promised when we talked about me co-hosting that I couldn't let this go by without telling you how much I appreciate ATO for doing that.
Yeah. I'll add to that. I had a guy call, and I won't say the agency, but it was nowhere remotely close to North Texas. Call me in a crisis. In a bad crisis. And I'm thinking, number one, if you're calling me, you're in a bad way because I got more baggage than American Airlines. So, but I'm sitting on the phone with him. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with him. So I called maybe Fred back then. I don't know. I called somebody, and they're like, no, get him taken care of. So I reached out to one of the ATO's counselors. They jumped on a call, then jumped on a Zoom, and then followed back up with me that they were good. They had talked with him, and this was late at night, and they had talked with him, and I thought, man, because I know ATO, Houston has an ATO, and I know you guys, but I was in a bind, and I couldn't jump in a car and magically get 6 hours to, but ATO never remotely hesitated to just handle it, get the guy, because I didn't know if we were suicidal, but I felt like we were close to that. And it wasn't anywhere near North Texas, and ATO helped in a bad bind.
You don't want to err. You always err on the side of caution if you think you're at that point. Being in the wellness unit, man, it's been in that situation. It's really scary. I mean, all of us here have dealt with people that are in that mindset out in the streets. We handle it. We move on. We don't know them. They're complete strangers. We don't see them again. But to see another officer that's in that same state, it's extremely terrifying, and you don't want to make a wrong decision.
Yeah. Well, and I thought, 30 minutes, hour away, I can try and get to him. 6 hours away, I'm not going to magically appear and be able to. I didn't know. ATO didn't blink it to help me get that guy off the ledge.
We have some amazing counselors. I mean, we really have a great lineup with, and I'm very proud of that and of what we've got going here. And I know other organizations and other ATOs, they have tried to get a confidential counseling program off the ground. Well, you're fighting so many different hurdles in this profession. First, stigma, and then also just this started in 2010, and it was very crawling along, and then July 7th happened. Boom, it shot up over 300%.
Well, I'll tell you this, and it's not because I'm here, but between the ATO and the OWL unit, literally everywhere I travel around the nation or phone calls here, do you by chance please have any connection at Dallas where I could get the model of what they got going on? You are literally the model for the country right now, and I've given y'all's model out that you shared with me more than a dozen times at least from all over the country, them trying to figure out the formula of what y'all got going on.
Well, I appreciate that. Nothing's perfect, and it's just we have a recipe here, and we're just trying to keep it going. We're Chief Garcia and Ruben put this in motion, and now it's kind of a full steam ahead locomotive. Yeah. And we don't want it to stop, because if it stops, that's the detriment of the people put on that uniform.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and y'all are actually changing lives. The first guy going through the process that has been a guest on here, you're changing lives. I was at retirement for a Garland officer that recently retired, that our chief took a bet, because in the past that officer would have been terminated immediately, and the chief took a gamble, probably to his own detriment, risking his own career. Mm-hmm. And I got to go to my buddy's retirement last 2 weeks ago because the chief took a risk and let him get some help. And he was able to stay on 6 more years, have a great career, and actually see retirement, rather than the chief being scared, pulling the trigger and letting him go and firing him or whatever. And it takes pioneers like Eddie Garcia that are willing to go, you know what, we're going to change. We're going to do things different now.
Well, starting here in '97, and Kent, you've been here a while too. It is night and day from whenever we started.
I can imagine.
And I've talked about before that our Sister Yasser Foundation counseling bill has increased dramatically from 2022 to it's almost doubled since 2022 up until last year, which is an amazing deal. But it also puts pressure on the foundation to keep it rolling. We need to keep getting donors to kind of keep help paying for the counseling. And I really believe that it's a symptom of changing culture. Mm-hmm. People are growing now. They're more educated now. I mean, that's when we started the show in 2021. That was the primary mission, is to educate people on mental health awareness and to change culture.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do here.
Yeah.
We're all old Texas law, man. We know that we know the stigma here.
Yeah. Well, as the executive director of TMPA will tell you, there's two things that cops hate, and that's change and the way things are.
Yeah. Very true. Yeah. I want to get into the Great Blue Grit podcast. Clint, you called me up one day. It was after Lance Crawford's episode, and you said, "Hey, you introduced yourself." I had already heard of you. You had an office. You have an office over there at the DPA. You had for years, and I was, it was an honor because you see our setup here. We're not fancy at all. We got wires going across our laps and in our feet, but we try to put the best product out. And when you called, I was like, man, I took that as a great honor to, yeah, absolutely. We'll help anybody accomplish the same mission.
Yeah, so both my sons are huge podcast listeners. I was just starting to get into it. I knew that I was tired of watching TV or listening to radio, started getting into it, and kind of had the idea in mind that we have to be the message. We have to get out and message. Got turned on to y'all's podcast, my guy Tony Godwin's podcast, Catfish Cops. The board at the time, the president of TMPA was Travis Hammond. Kind of threw the idea out. The board immediately blessed it, hey, here's a little bit of funds to run with to see what you guys can do with it. Like I had mentioned about Tyler, I do the same thing. I took off running down with the field with the football, had no idea what I was doing. We found a janitor's closet basically at the TMPA headquarters. John Sariga, my boss, jumped on board with my stupid idea immediately, and he and I painted it. I started researching what kind of foam do you put on the walls. Well, then after it looked pretty, I'm like, I don't even know what I do from here. So I called you, and I called Godwin, and then I called Lori Burks and said, do you by chance know how I can get in touch with DPA, Bridging the Divide? She's like, yep, text me the number. Cops are super competitive. I didn't know how that phone call was going to go. 30 seconds in, me and you were laughing and cutting up like we've known each other for 30 years. You poured yourself into it. Tony poured himself into, here's good equipment to buy, here's bad equipment to stay away from, here's where we failed, here's where we did good. And as soon as that door opened, Aaron Slater, Relentless Defender, did the same thing. Got to a point where John, my boss, asked, who's your co-host and what all are you going to do? I was like, I don't even really know who's going to host it. I have no idea. I'm like 70 yards down the field, and I don't really know where we're going from here. Tyler came on board. He's the most creative freaking dude I've ever met. He started running with it. He came up with the name, started logos. We took off running. The first couple of episodes I thought were rough because I was nervous as hell. My mouth gets me in trouble a lot, so I was overly cautious. Those first 4 or 5 episodes are the best episodes. I get feedback all the time that they like those first several episodes. And I think we just hit the 2-year mark.
Yeah, we hit the 2-year mark. And you got to think about it. Again, the podcast sounds great. The idea, right? But, and y'all know this as well as we do, you start talking about, what's the intro music? What's the outro music? What's the name going to be? What's the logo? And so, man, I can't say this enough. I'm thankful that Clint asked me to be on it. I'm thankful he included me on it, but I'm also thankful for our board and just TMPA in general, because I have been known to be pretty outspoken like Clint, and man, they've entrusted us to carry that brand. And that it's just another way for us to get our voice out there. But the beginning of it was an absolute train wreck, and so it was. And there's been episodes. Keep in mind, I was a full-time cop. Clint lives in Forney, and so we would have to drive to Austin and do all these recordings. Like in
Beautiful podcast room, though.
Yeah, no,
Good
they
Lord.
did an awesome job with it. Awesome job. It does look bigger on camera. I'm just gonna throw it out there.
It does.
That's the biggest. In fact, I think you said that too, Joe.
Oh yeah, and you look at. You're watching the video. Yeah, it looks like a big ass. you're right now. You're in a big room in the wellness. This is a big room. That room. But honestly, a lot of people, a lot about this because you do the editing for your show. Is the smaller the room, the better the sound. Yeah. Honestly.
Well, and what's interesting about it is at first, Clint and I both we wanted to have just crazy. Law enforcement stories. We wanted our messaging to get out there, and we've got some. We've got, the first 25 to 50 episodes of the podcast. But as slowly as we started kind of getting set in and getting comfortable, the reality is that cops just want an avenue to tell their stories. And I think those are the most successful ones out there. It's just allowing cops to tell their stories, giving them a platform, and us from an association, statewide association standpoint, understanding that, yeah, me and Clint are the host. And yeah, TMPA cuts the check, and they're the ones that keep the lights on. But in reality, this is our podcast. This is a statewide law enforcement podcast, and I think that's the biggest pride that we both share with that.
And that's been the two biggest compliments, I guess, that we've gotten with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, on who I didn't know was a DJ for like 20 years or owned a radio station or something. Yeah. He walked in and was like, "This is the nicest studio I've ever been in my life," and I was like, well, for two fools that put it together that literally had no clue what they're doing. And last week I was in Las Vegas at training in LRIS, which is an acronym for something, but it's a premier law enforcement training group. The executive director of it, who is a lawyer, they teach a bunch of training, professional continuing education classes. He got up to speak and started his opening intro. He introed his podcast, and then he said, "But our podcast isn't near as good as the Blue Grit podcast. Y'all actually need to listen to it." And I was like, holy shit. So on break, I go talk to him, and he's a extremely experienced lawyer, police lawyer, really good guy. And I was thanking him for it, and he's like, "No, my podcast is kind of boring educational stuff." And he started asking kind of this of how you got into it. And I said, we just wanted it to be anything police. We didn't want it to only be homicide stories or only this. I said, my vision was it'd be the gamut. We may have a lawyer on. We may have an officer that got ran over. We may have an officer that went to prison. We may have, it's anything police related. But to Tyler's point, what I've enjoyed more is, and sometimes I get busy and he'll go, "Dude, I've got an episode. You're not going to be on it." I'm like, I don't care. What I've enjoyed more than anything is letting somebody tell their story, because people's stories are freaking amazing. We've had two females on fairly close together. One shot in the face. One got hit by a car and literally knocked her leg off. They're both back on the streets. If I'd been through either one of those incidents, I'd probably be in a mental health institution somewhere, and both of those young ladies are back on the street and hard chargers, and I'm like, God bless, man. That's the story that people need to freaking hear out there.
The level of resiliency of the human race, it's really incredible. If and there's so many stories. It doesn't matter if you're in Dallas or you're Garland or you're Plano or Jefferson PD, they're out there.
Yes.
And me personally, I like the people that I have to kind of beg to come on that don't want to talk about themselves, because there's plenty of people that actually want to talk about themselves every day.
They call you trying to get on.
Oh God, yeah. I'm sure y'all have the same thing.
Yeah.
So Tyler touched on it a little bit, and I always tease that Clint plays the bass line in the opening music. But where did the music come from?
So we had and again, man, this was a back and forth 9 o'clock text. We were coming up with the names, and I came across this little audio file for the intro, and I was like, man, this has got a good tune to it. So we both agreed on it, but the funny one is the outro. Nappy Roots is the name of the song, and the group, and the song is called Hell No, HELLNAW. And so, man, I grew up in Irving, Texas, on the south side, jamming that shit out to a Ford Ranger a few times. It's I even knew what the hell it was. And so it came on one day on Spotify, and it was the instrumental version, and I was like, that's going to be the outro. I want every time somebody turns on the podcast, when they hear that song, they relate it to our podcast, and it's been successful so far. The first time I played the actual song and Clint heard it, he didn't recognize it because of the lyrics, and there's rapping and some other stuff going on, and Clint was shocked that that was the song that we picked. But yeah, it's just been it's a melting pot of different ideas, and it's been successful thus far. But it's been successful just because you're right. I think the resilience of not just law enforcement, but Texas law enforcement working in this state, man, it takes a lot of pride, it takes a lot of resilience, and I think that podcasts such as y'all's, the Bridging the Divide, law enforcement, our podcast, Blue Grits, Catfish Cops, this is a badass state. And we got some people working here that are just absolute warriors.
Well, I think it's important to have a variety of guests because let's say that somebody, they don't agree with you, and they hear a story that they may come around.
Yeah.
A long story taken in context as opposed to just sound bites.
Yeah. Well, and we've had guests on that weren't.
Oh, yeah.
That were on the different pendulum. And our goal wasn't for ratings, and I want to be clear on that. Our goal was to basically come there and give a different perspective to the uniformed patrolman or patrolwoman in a patrol car of saying, this is the mentality of these people that you're dealing with. This is how they think. This is why they think it. This is how we got here. And so that's kind of how we kicked that off. I
like how you said that, like if somebody, and I've listened, y'all have had other guest co-hosts on, like when Clint's not there or you're not, so you haven't been on some of them. So it's really, and we take this approach too. It's not Danny and I, it's not Kent and I, it's not Misty. It's when I'm just a guide. I keep a light hand on the steering wheel. I go by my flow, and the stage is y'all's or whoever the guest is.
Yeah, 100%. But I will say it's just like you. I mean, when you're on a podcast and you do it for so long, there is a chemistry that we've built up that when I'm struggling with an episode, and there's been a couple. I'm gonna go and call myself out. There's one that Clint wanted to almost crawl under the table. I was kind of nodding off, and if he could have kicked me while it was going on, I had gotten a whole lot of sleep the night before, and this episode that I was nodding off on was not one that I need to be nodding off on with people inside. But yeah, the chemistry that you build up with these people, they're brothers, they're family, and so it's cool to see it from that perspective in the studio, but also hear it and the passion that comes out. It's been an awesome ride.
One of the things I picked up from y'all's podcast is that y'all aren't afraid to really talk about anything or anyone.
No.
And calling out different leaders with air quotes throughout the state that you either do like or that you don't like.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, those guys got some cojones over there because they say some things that I'm like, whoo, that's a hot potato. But you guys have the inside scoop on all of it, too.
And I'll echo this. A good friend of ours, Joe Grimaldi with National FOP, the reality is that TMPA, our motto, is the voice of Texas law enforcement. You guys working at DPA, Dallas Police Department, and there's a certain level that you can't speak out. There's certain things that you can't just say, hey, you can't call BS on some things that you need to call BS on. It's an honor. There is plenty of people in this world and in this state that would love the opportunity that we have on a day-to-day basis to go out there and do that. And the reality is that we're just two cops, and we're two cops that have the ability to be the voice under the umbrella of some badass men and women that are field reps, our board of directors, and it truly is an honor.
Yeah, and some of the times when we're hitting those tough topics, we're trying to give a voice to the people that can't have a voice, or they're going to get terminated. And so if a brief moment, and I get phone calls quite often that, the chief is in a bunker in his office and is in a tirade, and the assistant chiefs said that y'all's podcast got emailed to him. So just letting you know the message was received, and he is on a 2-day tornado in his office and mad. And I'm like, okay, well, message received then. Very good.
I did my job.
Yep.
That's right.
Tough T.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
One thing that and I want y'all to talk about this, about one thing that really, man, what really gets me, what matters most to me is getting to hear from the people that send. I'm getting the messages from either emails or text or phone calls, and civilians or sworn or firefighters or military. It really means a lot. Can y'all talk about that?
Yeah, that's the part I never considered. That's the part I never thought about, is getting a text at 11 p.m. Hey, I'm working patrol and listening to y'all's podcast, and I appreciate what y'all had to say, or I appreciate that guest got to tell their story. One of the surprise feedbacks that shocked me, we had an officer on that who has a lot more intestinal fortitude than I think I would, but he screwed up on duty and assaulted someone. And he paid legally for it. I didn't know how that may go over. A lot of people listened to that episode. A lot of people valued that episode, and it taught me a lesson about being narrow-minded about the content or the guests that we've had on. We had on a DPS sergeant that was at Uvalde that got to tell facts, not skewed. Yep. Didn't know how that episode was going to go, but that man's broken. And letting him share his story of actually what occurred and the loss he suffered, that sweet man is destroyed, and is trying to rebuild his life. And those two episodes, I was like, man, I don't know how these may go over with our members, and our members have loved, the listeners have loved. The other thing I guess I didn't really consider when we started, and you talked me through this very early on, is we'll pull up the analytics, and we have a ton of listeners in whatever. Argentina or at one point Russia. We had a lot of Russian listeners, and I thought, well, that's why you can't beat. That's why you can't beat Ukraine, is because you're all sitting around listening to Blue Grit.
Yeah. It is that. Hey, that is funny seeing who the hell's Japan listening to Clint McNear.
Yeah. But the reality is this: is that our profession sometimes is not pretty. And the things we see and the things we experience and the things that we go through, it's not a pretty thing. I mean, and the cool thing is telling those stories. I saw a quote actually this morning, and the quote was, "I hope you win the war that you tell no one about." And I think it echoes back to the podcast of telling your stories, that sometimes explaining those situations for somebody else to maybe learn a lesson on. Just as Dotson, the first episode we had. My situation with losing a trooper, other episodes that we've had, it's been a great ride for sure.
Yeah, those are the most impactful for me. I mean, I literally last night, and I forwarded this message to Kent and Danny. Some of the messages I keep just because they're too personal. Yeah, and I just and you see on our social medias, I post a lot of the screenshots of the message because. And they're from all over. Yeah, I mean, I got Garland PD shout out. Jared Weston reached out to me last night.
My academy mate.
No shit. Yeah. No, he reached out last night and about appreciating the show, and that means a lot. Yeah. I had no idea. That's really cool.
He's a very good dude.
Well, shout out Jared.
Wife's a dispatcher. Son's a fireman now.
Man, getting those messages like that, because there's any time that I'm like, man, I don't want to do this no more. I'm going to stop at Kennedy at 100. Yeah, it kind of lights a fire under my ass. But
we've got more feedback, I guess, in person. Like when we go to a conference, or they recognize the voice. I'm sure it's happened to you guys too. Oh my God! And they recognize, they kind of look at you like, oh my, So
yeah, you're the guy that says a lot. I get that all the time.
But I mean, the feedback does fuel us. We've gotten a lot, but ours, I think, is more in person. What do you think, Clint? Do you think?
Yeah, that's the weird part that I never considered is walking somewhere, and it may have been y'all's cop's cop or something, but I walked by somebody and somebody snapped their head and said, I know that voice. Are you that guy on Blue Grit? And I'm like, oh, God, yeah. I'm sorry. What are you about to say? And they're like, no, I just –
You're balling up your fist, getting ready to knock the shit out of them. Yeah, your voice is pretty damn recognizable.
I know that a while back you were like, man, I don't know if I'm going to keep on. This is a lot. I
wake up every day thinking that.
We kind of hit that, or I did a couple of months ago, and we had a lot of positive feedback come up the last month or something. I don't remember what it was, but I called him and I'm like, you know what? we need to redouble down and recommit, double down, and it's on me a lot because I've been so busy is really reinvest in this. And I don't even remember what the.
We got an email, just a compliment. It was a mental health situation that they had emailed our chain of command, our executive staff, and it reconfirmed really the reason why we do what we do. And it reconfirmed that our commitment on that podcast has made a difference. And we've got a loyal listener he's an explorer and now is pursuing a career in law enforcement. We're going to have him on hopefully very soon. Lives in the Austin area, but no, it's just been rewarding and it continues to grow. And just like Clint said, the cool thing is law enforcement is competitive. But what's amazing to me is just the amount of support. People just open their books up and say, "Hey, here's my password. Y'all look at my analytics," and that to me.
I'm not giving you my password. No, I'm just kidding.
But it's been amazing just to see the cooperation. Typically cooperation within law enforcement doesn't happen. It's non-existent, or at least it wasn't when I was a full-time cop. It is within this little podcast world, and so it's been rewarding.
You mean TFO?
Yeah, that's right.
Without y'all, Tony Godwin at Catfish and Slater,
yeah,
with his, we would never have gotten off the ground because literally none of us had a clue, other than we knew how to paint a wall and put foam on it, sound dampening foam on it. That was as far as we got, and I'm like, okay, now what the hell do we do? This looks cool. Yeah. Without y'all three, literally, I don't know what I guess I'd have went to Radio Shack and bought a microphone and started trying to figure out how to record something without
that old Mr. Microphone from the 80s, that toy. Remember that?
Yeah. Give me some reverb.
Yeah. Yeah, and Tyler's in the corner with a Casio keyboard doing the jingle.
Well, that's how y'all laugh. That's how I think everybody has an interest in kind of like doing editing, and that's what sparked mine in high school was doing the VCR. We had to take up 10 VCRs and hook them together and make highlight tapes, highlight reels for football, and that's kind of what sparked my interest in doing editing.
Yeah,
I've gone a long way.
I'm glad I have a Danny Canetti because, man.
You brag on Danny all the time to me. If Tony if Tyler hadn't come on board, I'm the least creative person in the world. I don't know how to edit. I don't know how to overlay B-roll. I don't know. It would have been dead after episode 1. His creative mind has been huge in this. He's the Danny Canetti of this operation.
So coming up with a show, I mean, I've told this before, I got the idea one of first conference, 3-day conference. I told Ed Lujan on the next break, I think there's value in these kind of stories. I think we could do a podcast on this. Oh, good, go do it. Shit. I'm like,
me and my mouth.
What am I doing?
Yeah.
So literally that was in the summer of 2021. I was sitting at the pool with a notepad trying to come up with a name. The first name that I was pretty much settled on was ATO and the uphill battle. But then I started thinking, no, I don't want everybody to think everything's a constant struggle. So then I came up with what we came up with. Then something as small as the logo was she's a sergeant here in narcotics. She was out on a morning run, took that picture of that beautiful picture of the bridge.
Cool.
She took that and posted it, and I went, wow. I reached out. I said, hey, I'm doing a podcast. I'm starting a podcast called ATO Bridging the Divide. That's our Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge.
Yeah,
and then we added it in the logo, and it just that's what we use. So everything, and I got with Danny for the sound because I didn't know what I was doing. It's just stuff like that. So many little things have to fall in place to make something like ATO Bridging the Divide or Blue Grit podcast that nobody considers.
Yep.
Did you already have the 1-900 voice? Or did you have to hone that over time?
I actually have a British accent, and I do this voice just for the show.
Oh, okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We'll talk offline about that.
Okay.
Again, going back to the people coming up to you, y'all go out more. Y'all are out. Y'all come in contact face-to-face with more people than Kent and I do. I get uncomfortable. I scurry around headquarters sometimes to avoid people, and my wife knows this. I'm a huge introvert. But when I do masquerade as an extrovert, it drains me. So that's probably why y'all have more people coming up to you in person because y'all are out there a lot more doing y'all's position,
Yeah, I'm
I
probably
didn't know
not.
that about you.
Oh, God.
I mean, you're probably out more than I am, just because of the functions and stuff. But it does. It happens a lot whenever I'm out and about. Like when we're filming or up at the border. I mean, again, it's crazy the reach that podcast has.
You never know who's listening.
You never know.
Yeah.
And it's scary too. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I hope I cut that part out about so and so.
I'll have it like a chief here in the building. Oh, hey, I like that one. I'm like, oh shit, you listen.
Or even something you say and the intent of how you said it didn't come out. And so he and I will talk offline again. This that partnership, that brotherhood of saying, hey, you said this, but I don't think you intended for it to say that way. And so taking out of. Oh, my God.
James, Babb just shot the wheels off them. He has a shirt on here. What does that shirt say,
It
Tyler?
says,
Abilene is a cool town, but it's not Japan. Yeah.
One of many Tylerisms on the podcast.
That'll be this. That will make the title of this.
sometimes he just says something that inspires me, and I have to run with it.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
And I actually have one for you and one for Clint over on the table. I thought we were going to do this shirtless with Joe, but I guess not.
That's badass. I love it.
I didn't.
From our friends at Relentless Defender, by the way.
That's awesome.
Shout out Relentless Defender.
I said something the other day, and I got a text from one of our listeners, and he said, I can't. Did you just say that? And I was like, yeah, I guess I did, because mine's pretty raw whenever I edit it.
It even quotes you down at the bottom.
Yeah, I see that.
I
see that. Tyler Owen, 2024. That's. I bet those would sell.
Hey,
we'll find out at the conference, won't we?
Oh God. That's awesome.
You got to have his face on the back, though.
Yeah.
That episode aired, and James called me a couple of months ago. He's like, hey, did you – and I don't re-listen because I think I sound horrible.
I hate hearing my own voice. You have a
Bob
great
Thornton
radio
redneck.
voice. Dude, you have a
face for radio, too.
You do, but you have a great voice.
So James calls me and goes, did Tyler really just say that? I'm like, oh, crap, which one? He goes, did Tyler just say – Abilene's a cool town, but it's not Japan? Well, immediately I had remembered, because when we got up to that, I was like, okay, I'll go with that. We can roll with that. And I was like, yeah, he did. He goes, I think there's a shirt there somewhere.
Oh, man.
So I did text Joe from one episode. We may need to run with that quote, too, is I want to get into child exploitation.
Oh, God. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I said that, and it sounded really bad. But my intent was to get into the actual crime with the expert. I didn't want – that's for the listener, that's something I do not want to explore. So, James, I do want to go staying on the line of getting feedback from people, and y'all do episodes to not just tell kick-ass war stories, and some are. But also there's a message of resiliency, and also there's an education piece, whether it's teaching people about tools for resiliency and recovery and learning from mistakes, or the legal aspect. I mean, James, you came up to me, and if you're comfortable sharing this story about you heard one of our episodes, and it kind of took you down a journey.
Yeah. So I forgot his name, the guy that got promoted, that went through the alcohol treatment.
Gordon,
thank you. Yeah, I heard that episode.
Yeah.
I heard that episode, and I started thinking, some of those things are present for me, and I was struggling with an event that I'd seen more than 20 years ago. I live out by where that happened when I worked at a different agency, and it just out of the blue. When I drove by that spot, it would haunt me, and just I guess that's what flashbacks are or whatever. And I ended up going and talking to somebody about it. Ultimately doing EMDR, and it was amazing. It doesn't haunt me anymore. And for probably like 2 weeks, I felt like I was floating. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders.
Yeah, you came up to me in the gym, and right at the beginning of the workout, I mean, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I really appreciate that.
What made you, after 20 years, was it that episode that thought, man, if Gordon can do it, I can jump out? What was it after 20 years that made you go?
I think it was the timing of that episode.
Yeah.
Because it had been coming back, and it seemed to be getting worse. And just listening to his story and the things that were piling up on him, I was like, man, I kind of see that. I kind of see that in myself. And, I talked to somebody about it, and he goes, you know what you need to do. And I said, yeah. And the hardest part was making that first phone call because I actually had the counselor's number in my phone. I knew him. And I said, hey, I need to talk. And he goes, okay. He goes, we'll get you in. And when I did go talk to him, he goes, I think we need to go through that a little bit. But he goes, I think EMDR is something that we probably need to do. And when he said that, I was so relieved because I had heard so much about what it has done for other people with what I was dealing with. And you guys have said it on both of your podcasts. We see stuff that people just shouldn't have to see. Mm-hmm. And, this was a terrible, terrible car wreck where a kid died. And I don't know what caused it to come on at that point. I think just the stressors of work. And then my son was about the age of that kid. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know what it is, but it was there. And it's been there. And Dr. T had taught for us, and she said, look, my clients are not coming in about something that happened last week. They're coming in about something that happened in the 90s. And I kind of knew then, it's probably about time.
It's fascinating that something arises after that period of time. Kudos to you for recognizing it and addressing it rather than allowing it to linger. But I had a guy call. I've known him my whole life. He'd been in a shooting. And it'd been like 20 years, and he calls me in the middle of the night one night, schnockered, and is saying, yeah, I'm trying to figure out if that guy has a kid or not, and he keeps talking about it. And I said, about what? And he goes, my shooting. And I'm like, oh, shit, you got another shooting? He goes, no. Like, this is about the one 18 or 20 years ago? I said, yeah. Well, it hadn't bothered him all. So what made you do this? He goes, I have no idea. I just literally sat up in the bed the other night, and I've been drunk since. And I thought, man, that's fascinating, not in a funny way, but in how the human mind and trauma, and just the light blinked one night. He sat up in the bed and trying to figure out if the guy he was forced to kill as a child, and was drunk for the next 3 days till he called and reached out and got some help. But the trauma, it goes back to Gordon's story, man. We talked about in our podcast. A young man's a freaking trajectory changer, not just for himself, but for so many people. James, I mean, there's so many people that young dude didn't just change his trajectory. He's changing a lot of people's trajectory.
And a lot of people have talked about it on this podcast too.
Oh God. We know that whole, that him coming forward. I mean, y'all know the story, obviously.
He's braver than me.
Oh man, that episode was actually Chief Garcia's idea, because I work under the veil of confidentiality here in the unit. And we helped him and got him through that. And then I set up the meeting between he and Garcia, because Garcia was like, I want to meet that guy. And I'm like, well, I'll ask him, and that happened, and it kicked off. And then Garcia calls me up to his office after and says, hey, I know the ATO's y'all's deal, but God, that guy's story. And I said, yeah, it's pretty amazing. Well, he told Garcia some stuff he hadn't told me yet. And I said, yeah, let me see if if he'll do it. And Garcia goes, no, he said he would. Oh, well, thanks, Chief. Yeah, already setting it up. And then I said, okay, let me get with it. Let me get him to check his schedule. And Eddie goes,
next week.
Yeah, no, he said, I know his boss. He can come in there on a duty assignment. Dang, I went, dude. Okay, well, we're doing this. Because he understood messaging. And I think that message was so. I remember, Clint, whenever you first heard Gordon's episode, you actually were on a flight, and I don't know if you remember this, you texted me and said, damn, I'm listening to Gordon's story. I had to turn it off because I'm sitting here blubbering on this airplane.
It's amazing, man. It's his story. If his story doesn't inspire young and old, because the dude's brave, and it shows what resiliency and fixing it early rather than being that 55-year-old with your liver is pickled and you're a mess, and 10th divorce and 15th suspension, and hit it early, man. Be brave, bold, jump out there, and if you need a freaking hero, turn to Gordon, because that's all you need to consider. Yeah.
Well, you're showing it can be done, right?
Yes.
You're showing, like Clint, you talked about the Chief taking a flyer on your buddy, right? You're showing it can be done.
Yep.
And these people can come back and be just as good, or not maybe better than they were before.
Yep.
We're definitely a lot wiser. Yep. After, Gordon, I don't know where with my time in this wellness unit, what else I'll do. But that story and his recovery is something I'll carry with me to the grave.
Yeah, I hope I'm still alive when he's a police chief here.
Oh, God, I'd love that.
I thought I was just going to come in here to snipe Tyler, and then I go share my own story.
Yeah, I had that planned for you, James. I said, you're going to come to the mic. You're coming to the table. You're going to have to tell a story.
Pony up.
What is like your Captain Ahab, and you got the white whale out there of a guest? Y'all have that like a dream guest y'all would love to have on here on your Blue Grit podcast?
Man, I don't know. I'm a really big fan of Rogan, and it's not police related. But I respect, he's given me some insight on I'm not generally an open-minded person, but I think Rogan's growth is, let's hear all versions. I don't have to agree with your version. And when Tyler called me and said he was going to have on the number one activist in Austin, I was like, you're out of your
whip his ass?
loving mind. And we got a lot of positive feedback on that, and the dude ended up coming on damn near backed into a corner admitting that the police have actually never done a damn thing to him, and it ain't the police fault that the world is crazy. And that opened my old narrow-minded self up to be like, dude, let's have it on and cuss and discuss it and hear the sides. We have another potential guest right now that we're kicking it around and how it's going to be, but Joe Rogan he has everybody on, and sometimes it's a nut that he lets ramble, but that's how you learn, man. That's how you grow, is letting people come on and talk a little bit, and he's not exactly law enforcement related, but I'd love to hear it. I think we're going to probably have on a couple more officers that have made real bad decisions that choose to come on and share their story about how to not have those bad decisions that cost their career or criminally charged, I think would be mine. Number one guest so far, I can't the shocking guest of the year, because I didn't know his story and I'm dear friends with him. Aaron Slater about knocked me to the floor in his episode, and Justin Ellis's episode. I was there personally as he went through his stuff. If anybody watches, doesn't listen to our podcast, you'll notice I'm not on the second half of his podcast. I was going to be a distraction if I'd remained on that podcast. I couldn't hold it together. That's never been outed, but that's why I'm not in the second half of Justin's, is I couldn't keep my composure to stay in there.
I think I've got two dream guests. Kazar, now the congressman that was a city council person in Austin. I just want to simply ask him, like, what the hell he was thinking, and walk through. Yeah.
He's a congressman that demanded that police be defunded and then asked for extra patrol at his house.
And I think we're actually close to getting him on. The doors are opening and the sea is parting for that to happen. My other one, and this is going to be a challenge, and it's going to be very, very hard to control anger and emotions in it. But I would like to either go to a prison or get a person who is responsible for killing a cop, and to process the mind of just what the hell they were thinking and to hear the repercussions behind it. I think it would be important for the 22-year-old cop, the 25-year-old cop, the 45-year-old cop, anybody for the length of the service to hear. We always get told in the academy the cop killers identify the most dressed, and just process that one individual, the purpose behind it. Was it just a reaction? Was it, and to process all that. I think it'd be a very impactful episode, and I think it would be something that our listeners could resonate with.
Well, it's something another young officer or even old officer can actually get inside the mind of a killer.
Yeah.
And that kind of mindset could save a life if you understand that mindset and the way that person thinks.
Yeah, and again, it's going to be one that could be. It'll be a challenge, I think, to get that out there. It'll be a challenge to keep your emotions in.
Don't read the comments on that one.
No, yeah.
The educational side of it, I used to interview guys that would shoot at the police or had killed cops. And one of the trends that seemed, I remember one of them specifically, he had been pulled over previously and didn't didn't engage with the officer, and then was pulled over a very short time later, days or weeks later, and shot at the officers. And I asked him why, what the difference was. And he said the officer that stopped me a few weeks ago got out, looked like they were in pretty decent shape. Their uniform was in good shape. They looked like they were walking up to my car door and wouldn't hesitate to have in their back pocket a can of whip ass. And I said, why'd you shoot at the one tonight? He said they got out with a coffee cup in one hand, and it was sprinkling, and an umbrella in the other, and looked like they had been sleeping for 3 days in their uniform. And the minute they cleared the door, I knew I was going to shoot his ass. And I was like, wow, I never thought about, just as we're analyzing that fast, making assumptions and threat assessments. That was literally the words he told me is, the dude walking up to my car that looked like he had a can of whip ass in his pocket, I wasn't. But if you get out of the car with an umbrella in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, I'm going to shoot your ass. And I thought, okay, I guess I appreciate your honesty, but I never considered that.
Yeah, that's
a lot of value probably in that controversial guest.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, everybody sizes everybody up. You walk in, and that's the same out there. The hooks out there, they're sizing up this side. It's a cat and mouse game, and the mouse is sizing up the cat sizing up the mouse, and they're just – if you carry yourself in such a way – I mean, we just had on the Sarmiento twins, Chief and Lieutenant, and he has a similar story to that he pulled over a murder suspect by himself, and the guy was with somebody, and basically he was talking to him in Spanish. Once they arrested him, it came up he has a murder warrant. Well, he got cover over there and got him arrested, and the guy told him, he said, you know, son, I was gonna try to kill you, but you reminded me of my nephew.
Wow.
And he says, and you treated me with respect. He goes, if you'd have come up here with an attitude, he goes, there would have been a gun battle. And
wow.
It's you never know how an encounter can dictate the actions of others.
Yeah. Wow.
Tyler, we talked offline the other day. I was heading home. We're kind of game planning for this episode, and you told me about a story that kind of redefined your mission and why. Can you tell us that?
Yeah. It's a story that it was unfortunate that it happened, but I'm thankful that I was there to witness it because it shaped who I was and the cop I became. In April 29, 2008, keep in mind, this is Jefferson, Texas. Marion County is a very, very, very small county. Average population is probably around 8,000. Backup is probably 30 to 45 minutes away. This specific night, I think it was on a Sunday, Trooper Scott Burns was working. Myself was working, and one other deputy, and the deputy was on the east side of the county, which is on the Louisiana side. And Scott and me met in town, and he said, hey, I'm just going to run some traffic. And then it was actually hamburger night at the local diner, the only diner that was open on Sundays. And so Scott wanted to go run some traffic and get into some shit is what he said, and we'll meet back up, and we're going to go to Annie Skinner's and get us a hamburger steak. So shortly after that, I was standing in dispatch. Again, the rural town law enforcement in Texas, it is there are different patches, but there's one same mission, and you work so closely with troopers and game wardens and county police. And Scott went out to the west side of the county and started running traffic. And at this point in time, him and another friend of his did not have portable radios. They would put on the PA system, and that's how they would receive information over the loudspeaker. And so they would run what we called 27, 28s, the license plates and driver's license, and those returns would be broadcasted on the PA system. So Scott never carried a portable radio. So it wasn't uncommon for him to be in a shitstorm and it be delayed, or him go back to the county or the car and yell for help. Well, he got into a pursuit, and I start easing out towards that way. Again, it's one city cop, one deputy, and one trooper for an entire county. And so as I'm easing out to him, all of a sudden I'm probably 10 minutes away, and I hear a random person get on the radio. And there was a radio silence at that point. And I heard a random person get on the radio and say, hey, officer's down. Officer's been shot. He's been shot and killed. And I just remember, man, being 22, this is we've all have a huge mentor in law enforcement. And you got to think back to Jefferson at that time did not have a very sophisticated and lengthy training process. It wasn't exactly throw me the keys and say go forth and conquer, but I had a lot of experience to gain. And Scott took me under his wing. He was my mentor for that situation. And so to hear and know he was in trouble, the Crown Vic, I punched it even harder and got there to him. And I just remember the silence of knowing that my friend had been shot and killed. It was pretty impactful. But the most impactful thing was seeing the blood on his daughter's picture, who was 3 months old. And going through that experience, I knew that I never wanted to experience it again. And so I went through a dark time, probably 2 months after that, and questioned whether I wanted to continue my law enforcement career. But it also confirmed that this is why I do what I do. This is the reason why we put a badge and gun on every day and go out here and fight the good fight. And, man, it's just an honor to continue his legacy and some of the things that I continued on as a law enforcement officer. But I think that's what shaped my passion for law enforcement, was the death of him.
Tyler, thanks for telling that story. I knew after we talked on the phone I was going to get you to tell that, but I knew it was going to be rough. Anybody that listens to this show has heard me in tears, and sometimes I'll cut it out and other times I'll just leave it in. But we are human, and our response to these type of things, and to lose a friend and lose a mentor, that's probably one of the worst things you're going to have happen to you in your life in this profession.
And at the time, there was a kind of a buildup. There was a buildup that happened there. For whatever reason, that area in law enforcement, we had lost like 3 officers back to back, and Scott was the last one we had lost. And so it just kind of compounded, and it kind of just reinforced the reason why I wanted to do what I did. And there was another situation like in 2012. My daughter was just born, the same age as Scott's. And I was a motor cop, and there was a situation where I pulled up, and the woman had a gun in the house. And for whatever reason, when I reached down to grab the doorknob, I saw not my daughter flash before my eyes. I saw his daughter. And for whatever reason, I pulled my hand back, put my hand back on my gun, and backed out. And later on, when the TAC team got there, she began to shoot 3 or 4 British rounds in the front of that bedroom door where I was standing at before I would open that door. So things happen for a reason, and again, it shapes your life, and to live on, carry on his legacy. It reinforced why I wanted to do what I did.
It sounds like Scott was looking down on you that day.
That's right. Absolutely was.
So y'all actually had an episode that was with his wife.
Yeah. So at the time, again, back to me moving to East Texas from Irving, we didn't know a whole lot of people. We knew her my wife's family lived there. And so being a spouse of a law enforcement officer in a small 2,000 population town, there's not a whole lot of friends you can lean on that you can trust and, party with and have those fun times with, because you don't want to be the talk of the town. And so Scott was recently married and had recently just, they had just had a baby. He had just got off maternity leave. And so Michaela and my wife started hanging out and becoming friends. And so that's boom, is when this incident took place. Hadn't seen or talked to Michaela much since he was shot and killed. She moved off to Houston with some family, and believe it or not, at the 2017, I think TMPA, the Texas Peace Officer Memorial, I was standing there. Michaela was at that point the Houston Metro Cops president, and was giving the presentation and speaking before the body that was there celebrating the memorial. And so we reconnected then, and I got to see pictures of, my mentor's kids growing up, or his daughter, and it was just a good time to relive that, live on, see his legacy, live on, continue on. And when this podcast happened, we stayed in touch since then. Her being heavily involved with Metro Cops, we continued to rebuild that relationship. And when the podcast got started, I thought it would be a good episode for the listener to see something from the host standpoint that I lived through, but also, the fallen widow, right? And to relive that. So she agreed to come on and tell her story. And it was interesting when Scott was shot and killed. It's such a small town. To put things in perspective, there's Scannerland in East Texas, and Scott, his parents, heard the radio traffic every time he would work. They would turn the scanner on and hear everything, and I knew
it's very common for out east. Yeah,
it is. And so I knew Michaela thankfully didn't. And so I knew it was going to be a short time before she found out. And I had called Scott's best friend in high school, Mike Horn, who was a trooper at the time, and wanted her to get notified through somebody with DPS and not through Scannerland. So her telling her perspective that night, my perspective, it was a great episode. It's a good episode.
No, it is. And that had to be very rough for you personally to do that one.
Yeah, I was telling you off air, for many, many, many years, Scott had a very much East Texas drawl. He grew born and raised in Linden, Texas, town just north of Jefferson, and he had that, real thick accent, 1082, and that was his call number. And for years, I couldn't hear anything that remotely sounded like him or even speak his name without just losing control and crying or becoming angry. And to me, I know that you asked me and Clint this earlier, what we've gotten out of the show is healing. You look back at all the things, such as what James has, experienced with the not training you received, but the
EMDR.
The EMDR, it's a healing process. And there's so many things. I think the average law enforcement officer in America experiences, Clint, 230 critical incidences in their life, and the average American experiences 1. And so to put things in perspective, it's been so rewarding to see the podcast grow, but it's also been such a healer for me, quite honestly.
Well, I believe it's healing for the people that you have on and tell their story. Yeah. It is therapeutic. Mm-hmm. And I've had many people that have come on and talk about their worst day of their life and their worst loss of their life, and they reach out later with gratitude that they were you basically gave them a platform to tell their story that other people have never heard, and also it could help others that are in that same situation. Doing shows and stories with survivors, and anytime there's children involved, that just kind of rips me apart. And I don't want to make a habit of doing those because they are so hard. And let me ask you this: so, doing these shows, and when you're sitting across from somebody and you're absorbing all this emotion and energy, it isn't easy. It is not easy to sit across and just like you telling that story. I mean, it's sad, and it's all this emotion in this very room. Is like people like Gordon Fulton was talked into going to in this room, and we talked to many officers and other people in this very room on this show, and also doing business. And you walk out of there and you're drained.
Yeah.
Do y'all have that?
Yes.
Do y'all have that same experience?
100%. And I'll say this. I get asked this a lot. So does Clint. I've been there whenever they ask him the same question. Man, since you're not in a cop anymore, how's it feel? And trust me, to the listener out there that ever has the opportunity to retire or get out of law enforcement, there's going to be a moment where you feel disconnected with the profession. The cool thing about our job is that we never lost sight of that. And again, I go back to what I said. We've got nearly 34,000 members of Texas law enforcement. And for me to be able to be that amplified voice for that small percentage, man, it truly is an honor. It takes a lot mentally for these podcasts. You're mentally drained. It's like playing chess in your mind during these podcasts of what to ask next and not to get really engaged with your guest because you've got to steer the ship. But man, it's been an honor to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Focused on making the show is not about Tyler or I. It's people sharing their stories. But the unintended side effect, to your point, was you're emotionally and mentally drained. I'll go back to Slater and Justin's podcast. When I left there, I usually commute. I drive to Austin 3 hours. We'll shoot 1, 2, or 3 episodes, and then I drive 3 hours back home. And there's sometimes I get back in the truck to head home, and I'm like, dude, I'm not sure if I may need to pull in a hotel and go to sleep, or maybe this 3 hours to decompress before I get back to the house. And that's not a pity party for me, but every cop has these stories, and letting people see stories, sharing those stories is extremely important. And I'm humbled to be a part of it. I think it's great for people to see. Everybody's got that war that they're fighting. And then people like Gordon for people to see there's a upside to coming out of that tunnel. There's a bright light, and drive forward fast right out of that tunnel that's the upside that I don't get tired of. I'm fat and old, so car chases and foot chases probably aren't my thing anymore. But I get excited getting to hear a story or share a story and how that may affect others.
Well, it's just like being a cop. When we were policemen, there's probably tens of thousands of people that the 5 cops that are sitting in this room right now that have arrested. And if we made a difference in one, just one life, whether we arrested them and they got their shit together, whether they got off dope, if they were addicts, that's the sole purpose of why we did what we did. If we saved one cop's life, that's the reason why we do what we do. And I think it's a continuation of that service. It's a continuation of the service to law enforcement. And so again, that's why it's a passion for me, and I'm glad that it's unfortunate that I had to suffer the loss of Scott, just like his family did, but it's also an honor to continue on his legacy and be that mouthpiece for Texas law enforcement.
Well, I started saying 8 or 9 years ago, I worked at a very alpha agency. Garland is very alpha male led, and probably 7 or 8 years ago, I started saying I'm going to talk about it until people get sick of me freaking talking about it, because I'm not an educated person and I don't know a lot about the mental health industry. But if you talk about it enough, you can almost normalize something. So I thought if they're hearing this freaking gorilla talk about it a lot and that it's okay, at some point, in some small way, if I can try and normalize it. And the officer I referenced that the Garland chief took a gamble on, that as I was at his retirement 2 weeks ago, when he called me out crying for help, I called the chief and I was like, Chief, I like the chief. We had a good relationship, but I said, in the past, we would have taken this guy's badge and gun immediately. If we didn't fire him, he would be on admin leave and made it feel like in a police shooting is why he was in the crisis he's in. And I said we would double penalize him here. We would re-victimize him. I'm asking you to please not screw me over. And the chief put him on special assignment. Nobody knew it. Sent the dude for help. Part of what caught me off guard, he was my academy mate. He was from New York. He was gruff, tough. He was a Marine. And seeing him crumble was shocking to me because he was a gritty, like John Wayne dude. And seeing him crumble was shocking to me because that was the last guy I thought would suffer. And I thought, dude, he's more hard-headed than I am, if that's possible. He'll never get help. He got help, but what was so badass at his retirement is he got up and kind of Cliff Notes versioned in front of the whole department at his retirement 2 weeks ago. And he said, the more I talk, the more I realize, and he's not a social butterfly to go out and engage, do all this. He's like, the more I talk about this, it is so damn therapeutic for me. And if it helps others, that's great. He goes, but me talking, and I'm like, dude, I could never see this guy going out and sharing his story and admitting weakness and that he was in a crisis. And how awesome we've come from a place where if you say something bothered you, you're told that you're a big freaking wussy and suck it up, sissy, or, get out of this career, to now you have this tough-ass Yankee from, is in the Marine Corps, bomb tech, getting up talking about, yeah, dude, I was broke, and it's therapeutic, and I like to talk about it, and it makes me feel good to talk about it. I'm like, wow, what a really direction shift we've had. And it starts with us, but it's also, we had Eddie on a while back, and it took some bravery for my chief and Eddie to jump out and be like, well, if this experiment blows up, it may cost me my career with city manager, but I'm willing to gamble on my people, which a lot of chiefs are never willing to do even to this day.
Or sheriffs.
Yeah, and it takes Eddie, Jeff Brown at Garland, it takes people willing, in addition to us and podcast and you doing what you're doing, and it's actually an entire culture shift in law enforcement. I used to teach a lot, and I used to talk about there's been some shifts in law enforcement through the years. There was never SWAT for years, and after the riots and all that, they had to figure out how to change, and SWAT came about. That was one big shift, historical shift in law enforcement. We've gone through one, and you're on the ground floor part of another huge historic actual change in the entire culture of American law enforcement, and you guys have been the tip of the spear in that. Dude, that's huge. And back to his point, if me calling my chief and risking my dear friend hating my guts, then if it saved his life, good. You guys did it with Gordon, and kudos that the entire American law enforcement culture has shifted, and we've gotten to be some small spoke in that wheel.
I had a different final question for y'all, but I want to go a different route. Take your shirts off. No, I'm just kidding. You are the voice of Texas law enforcement. You already have a platform, just like we do. I want y'all to speak to the young officers out there.
Stay humble. Stay humble, be relentless, and realize that the badge you carry has been made by the burdens that we made. And just continue on. Continue the good fight.
At 21 or 22, you're invincible, you're bulletproof, and probably an adrenaline junkie. But this profession is bigger than that. You can change people's lives. You have the ultimate power to take people's freedoms away from them. You're under a microscope every day. You can do that good or bad. I wish I was more grounded early in my law enforcement career to have seen bigger picture than I did. But don't take the responsibility lightly. In every interaction that you come in contact with, whether it's another officer, whether it's whoever it is, you have the ability to affect somebody's life. And if you ever need an example, look at our man at Allen PD. He's talking sweet with a child about be sure you listen to your mom, be sure you wear your seatbelt, and you be a good kid. He hears automatic gunfire and immediately transitions from servant leader, servant heart, talking so sweet to this child, to get away from here, get in your car, grabs his rifle, and goes and freaking kills somebody. And I got chill bumps literally telling that story. If anybody in this country needs an example of what we do every day, whether you're a citizen or whether you're a 21-year-old trying to figure out what this career is, then you got my man at Allen PD, that you can be a caregiver and an angel and a warrior in 3 seconds and go kill a bad guy.
Brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up on you.